Thanks everyone for joining us. We're especially pleased that given his schedule and got to be the hardest working attorney general in our 50 states, we're honored that Attorney General Tong is with us late this afternoon and for part of the day. We have been blessed as a state and as members of Congress to have someone with his capabilities that has been able to challenge the Trump administration. As you're all aware, clearly, between the big, beautiful bill and the fact that the Republicans control the House and the Senate and have virtually followed every request that he has made, uh, it falls into the strong hands of determined individuals and someone with the capability of our Attorney General to push back. Attorney General Tong has taken more than 40 legal actions against the Trump administration. Um, just 2 weeks ago, Attorney General Tong joined a coalition of 25 states in suing the Trump administration over its unconstitutional, unlawful, and arbitrary decision to freeze 6.8 billion in funding for six long-standing programs administered by the U.S. Department of Education, including over 53 million for Connecticut schools alone. The Trump administration was forced to back down. Now you may say, well, what does that mean? Just yesterday, I was with the Boys and Girls Club and talking about the funding that was now restored to them to continue the unbelievable work that they do on a regular basis. An impact of $10 million, et cetera, that is going to come into the state, again, due to the efforts of a united congressional delegation, but doesn't happen without the efforts of our Attorney General. So this evening, we're going to discuss the big, beautiful bill in Connecticut, so to speak, and what it's done to Connecticut and the impact on it. And again, fortunate to have with us the hardest working attorney general in the 50 states of this union. And I want to open it up by giving him an opportunity to make opening remarks. We'll talk a little bit more and then get right on to your questions. Attorney General Tong.
Well, thank you, Congressman Larson, and thank you for showing us the way. Honestly, state attorneys general, Democratic state attorneys general mostly, have been preparing for this onslaught, this moment before the president took office for the second time. But as prepared as we were, I don't think you can be prepared for something as awful, as brutal, as cruel as the president has been over these last 6 months and the damage that he has done. And people ask me, well, what can we do in this moment, Mr. Attorney General? What should we do? And I tell everybody who asks you that question, you should stand up and fight. And the person that has fought harder than anybody else for decades for the people of our state and for people across this country is John Larson. And so, frankly, I hope you don't mind, Congressman. I've tried to do my best John Larson at times when I'm at the podium and giving him hell because you show us the best way and the most effective way to do that. I also want to share how this works. And the way this works is the president takes an action. If we have anticipated that action, then we're ready to respond. But sometimes we haven't been able to forecast what he's doing in a particular instance, and so we have to scramble our jets, so to speak. No pun intended with Pratt and Whitney in the congressman's district, but we have to scramble our jets and then launch our own birds. And what happens is state attorneys general acting on behalf of their states. William Tong doesn't act alone. When I act, the state of Connecticut is acting. When Tish James acts, New York is acting. Rob Bonta, California. So we are acting as states, not just as elected officials. And we raise our hands and we say, I'll do this, you do that. And one of the very first things that I raise my hand to do is to take the lead on Social Security. The attacks on Social Security are profound. And I did that because I know that our state, through John Larson, leads on Social Security. So I said, you know what? It makes sense because Congressman Larson is the guy on Social Security in Washington. I should be the AG that does the work on that. It's been hard, as you know, Congressman, to find the right response to what's happening to Social Security. They're getting smarter, frankly, in the Trump administration about how they attack federal agencies and programs and how they dismantle them and try to avoid a lawsuit from us or to inoculate themselves from lawsuits. So that's getting harder. But we are continuing to fight every single day. Just announced yesterday with your colleague, Congresswoman DeLauro in New Haven, that we are suing the federal government in its attempt to basically attack healthcare, and especially healthcare for women and reproductive healthcare in Planned Parenthood. We also filed suit to protect our federally qualified health centers and public health funding across Connecticut just in the last week. And so we are fighting every single day, but we are initiating lawsuits at a fairly rapid clip because the president is moving very quick to really, at the end of the day, hurt people in Connecticut and across the country. And what this is about is not just it's not about partisanship. It's not about a fight with the president. It's really, at the end of the day, sure, we can talk about the rule of law and constitutional crisis and all of that, and those are important issues, concepts, values to fight for. But at the end of the day, this is about protecting people from East Hartford to Stamford, families in Connecticut that are getting hurt, and that's why we do this work.
Well, thank you. I can't tell you how grateful citizens in this state are, and frankly, leaders all around the country who have recognized your incredible abilities and skills and how important they are at this time. And everything you've just said with regard to Social Security, and especially how clever the Trump
Yeah.
administration has been, starting with Elon Musk and Doge. And I want everyone to be aware of what their real goal is here. Why is it that they are rummaging through people's private data and information? What is it about Social Security that they're after? As you know, Mr. Attorney General, 70% of the federal budget is comprised of three agencies: Defense, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Social Security being the largest. Now, two have trust funds: Medicare, Medicaid for around slightly more than $200 billion, but Social Security, 2,700,000,000,000 of the people's money.
Mm.
And Elon Musk is salivating over that. And to the Romage had a little bit of a breakup there, etc. But they remain focused. And here's their goal. And here's what you're helping expose. Their goal is to privatize Social Security. What do I mean by that? And let's be clear. They want to turn this over to Wall Street. Why? Because they're eyeing $2,700,000,000,000 of the people's money. And so they're trying to dismantle Social Security from within by closing regional offices, laying off 7,000 people, phone service that's declining. They want the public to think that Social Security is falling apart and not serving them. But at the same token, as their Treasury Secretary Scott Bessert said just today, this is our backdoor effort to privatize Social Security. Thank you for your efforts in joining with us to say this is not a backdoor. We're going to open the door and expose it and make sure that the American people know what they're attempting to do. And what they're attempting to do is get their hands on the people's money. And everybody knows, because all you have to do is look at your statement that says FICA. That stands for Federal Insurance contribution. Whose? Yours. We're here to protect it because, as you know, Social Security is not just a pension, it's also spousal, widow, and children's benefits and disability that more veterans rely on than the VA. This is what's at stake. This is what they're trying to privatize out of greed and their desire to get after your money. We will not let this happen. But as the Attorney General said, it's going to require all of us to stand up and fight and call out this administration on what they're doing. So we're here this evening to listen to what you have to say, to educate and inform you of what we're doing, and to take your questions. And we can begin that unless the Attorney General wants to add something before we
I
start.
just want to echo what you just said, that the purpose of this is not to reform Social Security, not to improve Social Security. The purpose of this is to break it, right? They want to break it so that they can then say, look, it doesn't work. We've got to turn it over to somebody else. Or worse, frankly, it is frankly to make it go away. I mean, I think at the end of the day, maybe they want to turn it over to somebody else, but a lot of them just don't want it to exist. It is not, I hate the word entitlement. It is not an entitlement, right? It's not a gift. We earned it. The American people earned it. And it is a covenant, a promise that we make, that this country, frankly, right now is making to my parents, because it is an important part of supporting them in their retirement and making sure that they're provided for, and so many other Americans in the same position that they are. They work their entire lives, and this was a program to ensure that we would never again see older Americans, seniors in poverty, in destitution, right? That there would be a program that ensured that we kept that promise to the American people. And what they want to do is break it. They want to break the system and they want to break that process and break that promise.
Thank you. And yes, it's a sacred trust, as
That's right.
President Biden would refer to it. And it's a sacred trust with the American people. And they know that this is their money. It's, as you point out, an earned benefit, their money going to work for them. And some people would say, well, no, wait a minute. The business sector paid for part of it. They said they did, but they get fully reimbursed by the government. And who's the government? We, the people. So the people have fully paid for these Social Security benefits. And now it's up to Congress to deliver, and not only to just protect Social Security, we're out to expand it for the first time in more than 50 years. So why don't we open it up to questions right now? And Charles, are we ready with our questions? And we can answer them in any manner that we choose. I'm sure there'll be questions the Attorney General will have more expertise in, and vice versa.
Yes, thank you, Congressman, and thank you, Attorney General Tong. Our first question tonight comes from Bruce in Bristol, who asks, how will cuts to Medicaid impact our seniors in nursing homes? Are there any protections in place to shield these recipients from cuts?
Attorney General?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to overstate how profound cuts in Medicaid will be to not just people in nursing homes, but people and families across Connecticut. Uh, Medicaid doesn't just provide health care. Medicaid is about public health. It's about keeping people safe. It's about public safety. It's about a system that ensures that when people are sick in our state and across the country, that they get care, particularly people that don't otherwise have access to care. Didn't we just come out of a pandemic, a global pandemic, when we learned how important it is that not only that I and my family are healthy, but that my neighbors and my neighbors' children are healthy, and the people down the street and the people in another neighborhood, because we're all connected. And if we don't have healthcare, particularly during a raging global pandemic, right, it can spread throughout our community, throughout our state, and a lot of people died during COVID, right? Before the vaccines and before we were able to respond in the way that we did. So Medicaid is critical to all of that. What I don't understand the point of the attack on Medicaid, the attack on federally qualified health centers, the attack on Planned Parenthood. All of it, all of those are a piece of a broader healthcare system that keeps us safe, that keeps our neighbors safe and keeps us healthy and keeps people from dying. And the only thing, Congressman, that I can conclude is that the whole point is the cruelty, right? That they just want to hurt people, and I do not understand why.
I think that's how many people, when you look at this bill and a proposal that takes food out of children's mouths and forces people off of health care and raises their premiums, for what purpose? The purpose is to provide billionaires with tax cuts. It's immoral. It's cruel is the only way to describe that. And I think what people need to know when we talk about the so-called big, beautiful bill, what's going to happen is a 1.2 billion cut annually to Medicaid by 2031. 68% of nursing home residents across our state rely on Medicaid. And when Trump says, I'm not touching any of this, what he's not telling you is that what he's doing is shifting the responsibilities to the states so that the states will have to make these very difficult decisions, pretending like the federal government doesn't have any responsibility or decision making with federal programs. And so part of our effort is to make sure that we're educating the people. And believe me, when Democrats take control of the House of Representatives, this will be top on our list to make sure that we're restoring the benefits that they are cutting and alleviate the states from having to make these decisions on their own. And thank God we have people like the Attorney General in position to help us fight this along the way. Next question, Charles.
Our next question comes from Louise in Weathersfield, who says, I heard that we will be losing our Social Security in 2035, and that would likely reduce our check to 80 cents on the dollar. Do you have any insights as to what's going to happen?
Well, Louise, you're absolutely correct with a few minor little changes here, but yes, in 2035, it's now because of the Trump administration, because of the cuts that they proposed, it's actually 2033. That if Congress, who has the primary responsibility of acting on Social Security, doesn't take action, that we will see a cut in people's benefits. Now, the Social Security Trust Fund, as you heard us allude to before, is 2,700,000,000,000. It's sound and it's solid. But unless everybody is paying their fair share, and they're not, then the system will face the shock of having its beneficiaries see this drastic cut. Here's the deal. Over 70 million people plus rely on Social Security. Over 5 million of our recipients, most female, I would point out, get below poverty level checks currently from Social Security. There hasn't been an increase in Social Security benefits in more than 50 years. It is long overdue. And by taking no action, there will be a cut now in 2033 of 24% from benefits. That is outrageous and immoral. That's why we've put forward a plan. And I want to commend Leader Jeffries, who, along with Rich Neal and myself, will be leading a plan that will be introduced next week. And on the week of August 11th, on August 14th, Social Security will be 90 years old. And all across the country, people are participating, including the AARP, the National Committee to Preserve and Protect Social Security, Social Security Works, in making people aware not only of its 90th anniversary, but what's at stake here. And the fact that we are going to drop a bill not only to protect Social Security, but expand its benefits for the first time in more than 50 years. And it's great that we have an attorney general alongside of us who is both going to help us through this process of protecting what exists currently, but also is wed to the hip and understands the need. And all you have to do is visit as many senior centers as we do to understand how people are hurting. How can people possibly survive just on the meager Social Security benefits? And to call for cuts in Social Security because they want to privatize it so the wealthy can make more money off of it is criminal. Attorney General?
I would just say if these cuts kick in by 2033, then we have to get to it and fight as hard as we possibly can right now, so it does not come into being in 2033. It does not become a reality. And speaking for myself, I know Congressman Larson feels the same way. I will fight with every fiber of my being. And frankly, they can cut Social Security over my dead body. We're going to do everything we can.
And how do we pay for that? We pay for it by asking the very wealthy pay their fair share. Most people are surprised when they learn they don't. That's why the bill proposal that Leader Jeffries is leading says we're going to lift the cap on people over 400 million. Usually every town hall I go to, I ask people to raise their hand if they're making over $400,000. I've yet to have any hand go up except once in East Hartford, where a guy that I actually knew raised his hand. And I said, "You're making over 400,000?" He said, "No, but it felt good to raise my hand." And while it was laughable, the serious point here is people have to pay their fair share. This is capitalism's safety net.
Yeah.
This is money that goes into every single congressional district on a monthly basis. It is the most effective economic development plan that we have because people then take that money and spend it right back in the community they live in. They go to the pharmacy, the grocery store, they fill up their gas, they pay their rent or mortgage, they heat and cool their homes with this basic funding. That's why, as the Attorney General has said, over our dead bodies will we let this happen. Next question.
Our next question comes from Thomas in East Granby, and he asks, what are the chances of a government shutdown on October 1st?
Well, we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that there's no government shutdown. But you've seen or witnessed what's going on in Washington, D.C. It's horrific. This has been the worst appropriations process, as Rosa has noted, that we've gone through. But because they have not been able to get their act together, it remains possibility. Leader Schumer warned that the passing of the rescission package would jeopardize appropriations in general. Even Republican senators agreed that the White House actions will make the process more difficult. But I assure you, we will fight a government shutdown, even with all the ineptitude of the Republican Congress. General, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Thank you for fighting. That's all I have to say. I mean, the effects of a government shutdown, would be devastating.
If Rosa DeLauro were on the line, she said, can imagine that government has passed only one of the 12 governmental funding bills this year. And so we have a continuing resolution. And what that means is that it's a resolution to keep government open. Uh, I would suggest that we'll probably see another one because they have remained inept. But again, at whose expense and who suffers under these conditions? And just like I'm proud to stand with uh, Attorney General Tong, I'm equally proud of Rosa DeLauro and her efforts and her fight on appropriations. When we regain the majority, he will serve again as appropriations chair. First time in the history of the state of Connecticut that we have had a chair of appropriations. And with Joe Courtney occupying his key committee on armed services, especially as it relates to undersea power, and me chairing Social Security, and Jim Himes on intelligence, and Johanna Hayes on education, it's the strongest position the Connecticut delegation has ever held historically in the history of the country. And we're proud to serve our people. Next question.
Our next question comes from Diane in Cromwell, and she asks, how did our data at Social Security become available to Doge?
Well, our data became available and primarily at Trump's request and something that Elon Musk did. You may recall, in fact, that the Social Security head at the time refused to do it and stepped down. And then, unfortunately, and I think the Attorney General can answer this better, the Supreme Court, for what reason I cannot imagine, said that, well, no, Doge can continue to go through your individual data and information. For what purpose? For what reason? And you may recall that we called Elon Musk and Doge before our committee on Ways and Means to ask him those questions, and they refused to come. And the Republicans refused to answer why Doge should have any access to people's individual information on Social Security. And again, we now learn today from their Treasury Secretary that it's all part of their scheme to privatize Social Security. Attorney General?
Yeah, this represents the largest data breach in American history, not just at Social Security, but at Treasury, at IRS. We sued in the very first days of this new administration when DOGE tried to go into Treasury, and we got a preliminary injunction there. And now we just sued in the past couple of days to stop USDA of all agencies from invading information and taking information about SNAP recipients, people who are receiving supplemental food assistance, and taking that information and sharing it for God knows what reason. And so what we're seeing is the largest ever data breach in violation of the privacy of millions upon millions of Americans, and information not just about who we are and where we live, but our health care, right? Medical conditions, family and genetic information. And so, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has not been helpful there, but we are looking always for ways. We did it with Treasury, we're doing it with SNAP, to use all the legal powers at our disposal to sue and to stop this president from continuing this huge data breach.
exactly right. And also, I want you to know that we've introduced legislation. I introduced what I call the Protecting American Social Security Data Act, which would block political appointees and special governmental employees like Elon Musk and Doge from accessing sensitive data systems at the Social Security Administration. It would also establish a privacy requirement in law for beneficiary data and strengthen and ensuring only Congress can change them, and also strengthen oversight and civil penalties for any privacy and disclosure violations of Social Security beneficiaries' personal information. We're here to protect your individual rights and data, and that's what this legislation will do. And in the meantime, we're blessed to have people like AG Tong fighting on our behalf as well. Next question.
Our next question comes from David in Southington, and he asks, what makes you think that something can be done going forward to protect seniors on Social Security?
Well, what makes me think something can be done are the people all across this great nation, and also the leadership of leader Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries was on the floor for more than 8 hours, where he stood up and spoke specifically about the defense of Social Security and what needs to be done, and why Democrats will be introducing legislation next week to correspond with the 90th anniversary. I can understand the gentleman's skepticism because it's been more than 50 years since anything's been done. And if you're a Social Security recipient, don't you think a lot has transpired since 1971? Now, some will say, well, wait a minute, didn't something happen in 1982 with Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan and Bob Dole? And yes, it did. Reagan wanted to privatize Social Security. Dole, a Republican and a senator, was opposed to it. And Tip was for preserving Social Security and standing by the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly, the #1 anti-poverty program for children. And they came up with 2 against 1, a compromise. They called it a compromise, but it was really Tip saving the program. And the Republicans at that time saying the compromise was to raise the age. So you may recall that the age under that act was raised from 65 to its current 67 years old. So the good news, I guess, was that Social Security was preserved. The bad news was, and people should be well aware of this, for every year you raise the age, that's a 7% cut in benefits. So the only proposal that our colleagues on the other side have made so far with respect to Social Security is to raise the age to 70. Now they're saying, well, people are living longer. Well, that is true, and that's a good thing that people are living longer. But because they're living longer, should they be living on less? That's a 21% cut in benefits alone by raising the age to 70. And that cannot be tolerated. It's already difficult enough for people. More than 40% of the nation, this is the only benefit that they have. And with males averaging approximately 18,000 plus on average, and females 14,000 plus in terms of Social Security benefits, that's barely enough to get by on. And so it's why we've introduced legislation that expands Social Security coverage and lifts people out of poverty and makes sure that the program remains solvent into the future and addresses the disability concerns as well. Mr. Attorney General?
Yeah, I I understand the frustration in the gentleman's question. Um, but to be honest, if your point is that there's nothing we can do about it, or that this battle is lost, then Congressman, I would say, then what's the point? We might as well hang up this Zoom and everybody should go home. You know, yes, we believe that we can change the course of history. Yes, we believe that we can protect people. Yes, because we're fighting now, and this fight in some ways has been successful. And so I'll give you an example. Just the other day, the congressman mentioned this in his opening remarks about billions of dollars in education cuts that Linda McMahon, unfortunately from Connecticut, that she effectuated by not cutting checks for funding that's been appropriated by Congress on July 1st, the way it's been done for 30 years. Okay, she said, I'm not going to pay that money. And that was roughly $7 billion, tens of millions of dollars to Connecticut. Now, if I had done nothing, if I had just gone home and said, forget it, the president's too powerful, Linda's too powerful, there's no point in fighting, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna sit on my hands, then that money would be gone. Instead, we as a state joined with other states and we stood up to the president and to Linda McMahon and we fought. We filed a lawsuit to push back hard. And guess what happened? A few days later, the president said, well, you know what? Kind of just kidding. We're going to start releasing some of that money. You have to fight. There is no point in saying this is all heading in the wrong direction. The war is lost, and the president's doing so much damage, and to have a fatalistic attitude like that. The fight is hard. Yes, we're not going to win every battle, but in some cases it's working. In some cases we're successful. In some cases we're not. But we have to fight for each other and our families and our community.
Thank you. Next question.
Our next question is from Monica in West Hartford, and she asks, how will cuts to Medicaid affect residents who truly need these benefits?
Well, Monica, that's a great question, and thank you, because it needs a very direct and specific answer. Starting in 2027, Connecticut will see their overall Medicaid funding from the federal government decreased. And by 2031, that will mean 1.2 billion annually. The state of forcing, as we discussed earlier, that will force the state of Connecticut to make tough choices because it's the federal government shifting responsibility to states. The Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan group, has estimated 186,000 Connecticut residents will lose their health care because of the so-called big, beautiful bill. Why? To pay for tax breaks for billionaires? That is outlandish. Look, I can understand how people would like to see tax cuts, but I dare say that even billionaires who look at this can't look themselves in the mirror knowing where this money is coming from, taking food out of the mouths of children and the disabled and veterans, and eliminating people's health care coverage and causing others who stay on it, their premiums to rise to provide a tax cut for billionaires? That's outlandish. Attorney General?
I mean, the simple answer to that question is people are going to die.
Yep.
They're going to die. And they're dying now. If you can't get access to routine screenings, cancer screenings, and then you later discover when it's too late that you have cancer, you're going to die. If you feel like because you're in, either you're undocumented or you live in a mixed status household, and there's an undocumented person in your house or somebody has a complicated immigration story, so now you're afraid to go to the emergency room, or you're afraid to go see the doctor, you're afraid to go to a federally qualified health center, people are going to die. And that's the hard truth. If you're a senior and you can't get your medication, then you're in big trouble, and seniors are going to die. And so I don't mean to be dramatic about it, but that's what's happening. And that's what it means to deny Medicaid to people. And by the way, um, Medicaid flows to our state's hospitals and providers. And if you cut Medicaid and we can't reimburse at the same rate, that means emergency rooms, hospitals can't afford to pay for staff, to pay for doctors, nurses, medication, equipment, um, you know, all the things that a hospital needs to provide life-saving care. And if you show up at an emergency room and you're in bad shape and they don't have the doctors to see you, people are going to die.
That's serious. Next question, please.
Our next question comes from Stephen in South Windsor, and he asks, can you explain how these tax cuts that Republicans recently passed will largely benefit the wealthy?
Well, yes, we can, and it's a good follow-up question. And Stephen, the top, not even the top 1%, but the top 0.1%, that means people earning over $2 million will see a $309,000 tax cut next year. And you hear the administration saying, well, wait a minute, here these Democrats go again. They're trying to, pit the wealthy against everyone. We provide tax cuts for everyone. Well, they provide tax cuts for a lot of individuals, but yes, let's put it in perspective. So that top 0.1% will receive $309,000 in tax cuts, while those earning less than 50,000 will receive $247. That's 67 cents a day. And some will even see their taxes, however, as has been pointed out by the Congressional Budget Office, but also Yale, the Penn Wharton School of Business, and Georgetown University will see their taxes increase. And these numbers don't even include the impact of increased health insurance premiums and food costs, which will mean more low-income and middle-class families are worse off. So, and the other thing, when people say, well, Democrats just aren't in favor of tax cuts, that's not true. And in fact, Rich Neal, the ranking Democrat on Ways and Means, offered a bill to cut taxes and paid for by having those who already are extraordinarily wealthy, pay for the tax cut by going back to the rate that they used to be at, from 37.9% to 39.9%. And with that, we could ensure that everybody earning under $400,000 got the tax cut, so that the tax cut was aimed directly at the people. And here we're not only talking about the working middle class, but the middle class in general, who are dealing with cost of living in a cost of living crisis right now. And people where there used to be access to the middle class, finding that it's not accessible anymore because they've been burdened with everything from college loan debt to trying to buy a home, and am finding themselves even further squeezed because of the disparity that exists in the tax code. So yes, Democrats are for tax cuts, but they're for them going to the people who are going to need them the most, that will strengthen and enhance the middle class in a way that will help the entire economy out. And no one at the very top is going to be hurt, and the nation will not go into hell in a handbasket because they have to pay their fair share. Attorney General?
Yeah, you said $247 for a family Was it under 50,000 or
Correct.
yeah. I mean, if you're lucky with today's food prices, that's two, maybe three trips to the supermarket. Maybe. I mean, just to put in perspective, right? What's that going to do for anybody? It certainly doesn't help middle income and lower middle income people who need the help now because they're getting squeezed every single day by the price of everything. And um, and then you think about the flip side of it. I think there was, obviously President Reagan had this view that if you adopted supply side economics, trickle down economics, and you gave the money back to the rich, that through tax cuts, that they would invest it into factories, businesses, production. But there's no real evidence that that's happening, particularly among the billionaires, right? What you're seeing instead is the buying of more yachts and more extravagance. And not maybe 2 generations ago, you might have said somebody who's got a big business and a factory and gets a tax cut is now going to potentially put that back into that factory and those workers. That mythology is not even remotely true anymore. And what you're seeing is people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and others. I mean, did you see the extravagance of Bezos's recent wedding? All of that goes to luxury and extravagance and wealth and the hoarding of wealth, and not to what economists would call production.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And such a great point. And the disparity, as you pointed out, is it cuts to the core of what Congress should be all about and doing and serving and protecting. And it's not just this case of the poor and the working poor. It's the middle class that's right before our eyes disintegrating and without a path forward in access. And because of and also that people at the very top can have more wealth. When people talk about wealth inequality and disparity, I think your examples were extraordinarily poignant. And that's why we need to focus on that and make sure that we change this in a fair and equitable manner so that people will take that money and just like with Social Security, invest it right back in the communities they live. And so that a rising tide can truly lift all boats. Currently, you can't have a rising tide if you're anchored at the bottom,
Yes.
as they have with these policies.
Yes. And let me say also to the people that are watching and listening to this, yes, you have a congressman, attorney general, but nobody knows this better than we do. My very good friend Tim Larson is a congressman's younger brother, and we served together in the Connecticut House of Representatives. And we used to play this silly game when there was a lull in the action. And he would go and Google my childhood home in West Hartford. And he would compare and he would say that where you, Congressman, and Tim lived in Mayberry Village was much worse than my parents' home in West Hartford. And we would have this competition about who had it worse. Okay. Um, but people ask me what gives me hope about this country, even in this dark moment. What gives me hope is that a kid from Mayberry Village worked extraordinarily hard. I think you played football, Congressman, and
I did.
in one generation became a congressman. And my parents came to Bloomfield, Connecticut with nothing. They met in a Chinese restaurant. I grew up in my parents' Chinese restaurant in Weathersfield, working side by side with them. And in one generation, I went from that hot Chinese restaurant kitchen to being the Attorney General of this state. That is the truth of this country, our families. That's what we're fighting for. It's not just about tax rates. It's not just about income inequality. It's about this is what it means to be an American. that our parents could hope that we would have this opportunity. And what we're fighting for are kids just like us who are out there right now in East Hartford, in right here in Hartford, where I am, or in Stamford, where I live, who are fighting for this every single day. Their families are fighting for it every single day. They're in today's Mayberry Village, or my parents lived on the boulevard in West Hartford. And those kids, I still believe, Congressman, they will make it. Those kids will make it just like we did if we fight for them right now, if we fight for them and their families.
And throughout history, we've had fighters. I couldn't express it more eloquently than you just have. And but from our parents' generation, imagine uh, there's a reason they're called the greatest generation ever because they were. And not only having persevered through the Great Depression, they went out and saved the world and took on a war on two fronts in the Pacific and in the Atlantic and persevered and won and laid the architecture for a future where there could be peace. It's a never ending fight and battle, but they established the United Nations. They grew a nation. They expanded on Roosevelt's concepts and went from not just Social Security, but to Medicare and Medicaid. And then providing also a better outlook for the future and looking at all of the things that relate to both education, the environment, and working rights, etc. I'm proud to have been part of a party and part of a family growing up that also where giving back was always the thing that was most important and working on behalf of the people you're sworn to serve. There's no better example than you, Mr. Attorney General, of that. I believe that we have time for just one more question, and then we'll have to go. But squeezing that in, I want to again thank you for being here this evening now with us. And let's turn to what's the final question? We have it.
We have one final question from Liam in Bloomfield, and this was a question we got a couple on. And he asks, how are the Attorney General and the Congressman working together to protect Connecticut communities from ICE?
It's a great question. And why don't I start? Because it
Yeah,
was great working
we're,
this year with the Attorney General.
we're doing everything we can. And um, let me just set the table, though, very quickly and remind everybody that this is the sovereign state of Connecticut, which means that we get to live the way we want to live. We are joined together with 49 other states in a federation. The federation is called the United States of America. And we delegated limited powers to the federal government. That's the design of our country. We delegated powers that it's better for the federation to handle because individual states themselves are ill-equipped to handle certain of these tasks. One of them is immigration. And so the federal government has broad power and authority over immigration. And at a certain level, um, they're going to do what they're going to do. And there are limits to what states can do. However, the very first lawsuit we filed was to preserve and protect birthright citizenship in this country. That fight has been largely successful. We just got two court orders in the last week agreeing with us that the 14th Amendment means what it says, and that is if you're born on American soil, you're an American. And that could not be more important to me because I became the first American citizen in my family by right of my birth on American soil down the street from here, from my office in Hartford Hospital. And millions of Americans share that story. And so we're fighting on that front. And we are working with community organizations and neighborhood organizations to make sure that immigrants and immigrant families know their rights. We, Democratic attorneys general, are pushing ICE and the federal government. It's an uphill battle to stop wearing masks and to stop kidnapping people off the streets. And if there's an opportunity for us to file suit and to block the federal government from taking action that we think is unconstitutional, we will do that. It is also my job to support our state's Trust Act, which is designed to ensure trust between individual people and residents in Connecticut and law enforcement and first responders. If you're an immigrant and you're worried about your immigration status, we don't want you to hesitate if your car's getting broken into, or your house getting broken into, or you're the victim of domestic violence, or your house is on fire. We want you to call 911. And if you're worried that by calling 911, somebody will essentially rat you out to ICE and that you'll get deported, then people are not going to call the police and they're not going to call the fire department. And so what the Trust Act says is local fire and police should focus on their jobs, which is protecting people in Connecticut, and not to do immigration and customs enforcement work for the federal government, because that's not their job. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm fighting hard for that principle every single day. And I just want to articulate to everybody on this call, as your Attorney General, I want to make it very clear. It is the policy, and in many cases, the law of the state of Connecticut to respect, honor, and protect immigrants and immigrant families. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, you can't say it more eloquent than that. And I want to thank the Attorney General again. I would just add quickly that, you know, last week in East Hartford, Connecticut, ICE agents took an Afghan visa holder
Yes.
in an unmarked van from my hometown of East Hartford. Everyone should be outraged by this. There's legislation that is being placed in Congress on several fronts, but certainly Senator Blumenthal, Johanna Hayes, Attorney General Tong, and all of our colleagues are calling for Zia's reliefs, which should take place. That's what we're up against with this administration. And that's what we'll continue to fight for. I hope that for those whose questions we weren't able to take, that questions that were sent in, we will answer all of them and get them back to you in writing, and look forward to doing these as we continue to try to educate the public in terms of what's happening governmentally and what our responses are. There are many good questions, and it's good to see an active and concerned citizenry, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to change all of this. It's going to change because the people speak out and stand up, like our Attorney General has on behalf of the entire state of Connecticut. I want to thank him again for joining us here this evening and look forward to working with him and doing another one of these town halls. With that, God bless you. God bless America.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.